Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome to the start of a brand new franchise mode series because we just wrapped up our Houston series. If you guys caught that live stream, I really appreciate your support on that stream. That was really awesome. 9 hours of streaming, so my voice might sound a little bit sore just because I am recording this day after the stream, but yeah, it was an awesome stream. Really appreciate everybody that came out. All those of you that are watching it after the fact, I also appreciate you. Anybody that checked out that series in general, really appreciate it, because that series was probably one of the most fun series I've had in a long time, and we'll definitely have to do another Draft to Glory in NHL 23 once that drops. But anyways, we're going to be starting up a throwback franchise mode with the Hartford Whalers, so based on like the voting and stuff like that for the throwback franchise, it's really interesting because a lot of you guys wanted me to do a 2010-11 throwback franchise, but also everybody, like 10 people, voted for the Hartford Whalers, which obviously the Whalers didn't exist in 2010-11. So we are going to be doing the Hartford Whalers from the 1996-97 roster build I have. So this is the last year of the Hartford Whalers, but we are going to probably keep them in Hartford just because it's a lot more fun that way, and then we can kind of see what happens if they actually stayed in Hartford, that type of thing. So, but as you can see, they got the divisions set up the way they are in 96-97. So you got a little bit of an interesting Pacific division with like the Colorado Avalanche over there. The Central Division now has Detroit and Toronto, which is weird to see Toronto in the Western Conference. The Atlantic Division has obviously the Whalers in there now. It has also Finland and Sweden, who are replacing like Minnesota and one other team. I'm drawing a blank for some reason, but there's a couple replacement teams if you guys remember from my videos earlier in the year. Also in the Metropolitan, we got the North American Future Stars replacing the Winnipeg Jets. Tampa Bay and Florida are both also over there. Pittsburgh has been moved over to the Atlantic in that change up as well. And yeah, that's basically the gist of these division realignments. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what this league sims like, because I haven't done a throwback franchise with my rosters at all so far, so this is the first one I'm doing. As you can see, pretty much every team in the league is very similar overall wise. You got a couple teams that are standouts like New Jersey, the Rangers, for example. Obviously, Detroit's really good, being an 89 overall. Buffalo's actually pretty decent as well. So all the teams you'd kind of expect to be really good near the later part of the 1990s. So we should be a team that doesn't make the playoffs with our overall, but there's a chance that we could randomly make it, which hopefully isn't the case. We don't want to make the playoffs necessarily right away, but we obviously do want to win a Stanley Cup as fast as possible, because this is going to run right up until the end of NHL 22, so that's probably only like 2 months and maybe a couple weeks away. So at this point in this video going up, because it's August 1st, day you guys are seeing this video. So anyways, let's get into this and get this set up so it's perfectly set up for a throwback franchise mode. So we are going to keep owner mode on, but I am going to have it on auto owner mode, just because I feel like it's a lot of fun with throwback franchise modes, because you can kind of see guys' jerseys like Jeff Sanderson's being available, that type of thing. CPU trades obviously on, player morale is going to get turned off, and fog of war off as well. GM firing off, and head coach at lines off. Salary cap is also going to be turned off, just because it's a throwback franchise mode and most teams won't be cap compliant, so we're going to turn that off as well. And I think everything else is going to stay the same. Yeah, everything else is going to stay the same. The reason owner mode's on is just because it makes it a lot more fun with throwback franchise mode, and that's why I put it on auto, just so the AI does it. But it's still going to be interesting to kind of see players, like I said, throwback players with jerseys available and that type of stuff. So let's go continue, and let's set it up in terms of the rules and settings. We're also gonna have to do some more of that once we actually get into the mode, and then I'll show you guys our roster, and I will show you probably also the other teams in the league's rosters. I'll try and go through that a little bit quick, just because my voice is not going to last too long today probably. So authentic cap penalties is going to be turned off, obviously, since this is a throwback franchise mode. Yeah, injuries on is good. Autosave is on is okay as well. CPU trades is good. Draft pick ownership is going to be turned to classic, so everybody gets back their picks. Trade difficulty to hard as well, which should be interesting to see how this works with the throwback franchise. Waivers should be on, I think, at this point as well. I think the rest of this should be okay. Auto scouting is good and all that stuff. Yep, that's good. Then we go to advanced settings. What else we got here? Fully healed is what I always go to for this type of thing. Sim engine scoring will leave at medium. but we could honestly turn it to low for this time period, but I will leave the rest of this just medium because that's what I normally leave it at. Playoff series length is authentic. That's good. Season overtime loss. That's going to be interesting. So we will do single overtime 4-on-4. And then there will be no points for a loss in overtime, but 1 point for a tie and 2 points for a win in overtime. Trade offer notifications are good. Waiver notifications, that's good. Retired jersey numbers are going to be turned off. And that's pretty much that, I think. Yep. That's all that. Game player sliders, we're going to definitely have to turn the injuries down again. I might turn it down to like a point where we don't really get any injuries just because it's kind of annoying otherwise. But I will put it to 9 out of 100. And we'll see how that helps out. Because I wouldn't mind there being some injuries still, but I just don't want there to be too much that we can't handle it, you know. And the rest of this is going to stay the exact same, I think, and that is good. So we are ready to start up our Hartford series. Very excited to see what this throwback franchise mode is going to be like. Obviously, because I made this roster months ago, but I never got to play it because I've been too busy with a lot of other franchise modes, other roster builds that I did, so that type of thing. So there we go. Let's take a look at our roster in the contract screen just so you guys can see the contract situation. We'll also show you guys the draft class in this episode too. And I will show you guys the rosters for every other team just in case you are curious about what the rest of the league looks like. Because I don't think I did a roster breakdown for my 96-97 build. So, okay, so for the Hartford Whalers, here are your centermen. We got Andrew Castles, who's an 86 overall at 27. He's only signed for 1 year, then he's a UFA, but he is still a pretty good piece to keep around, I would say, if we could keep him around past the season. I don't know how much he's going to want after the season, but he's a pretty damn good player, I'd say. Keith Primo, really solid player here. Obviously, he came over in the Brendan Shanahan trade, if I'm not mistaken, from Detroit, which would have been at the trade deadline of the season or earlier in the season. I'm not 100% sure of that. But he signed for a 3-year deal at just over 1.7, closer to 1.8, you should say. But yeah, he's one of our pieces that we'd probably build around, I'd say. You also have Kent Manderville, who's a decent bottom 6 type of guy. So you got some good young centers, I would say, at the most part. Like, Manderville's definitely a serviceable 4th-line center. And then Primo and Castles are both really good. Like, if Primo outgrows Castles, then maybe we use Castles more as a 2nd liner. But I think we could keep around a lot of these centers for this team. Left wing wise, you can see we got a nice 24-year-old Jeff Sanderson, who is signed for 2 years at 1.5. And then he's a UFA. He's a very important piece probably to this team to keep around, just because he's a good shooter and all that type of stuff. That's what his stats look like in case you guys want to see that. But we should probably keep him around if possible. We also have Derek King, who's only signed for 1 year. He's a pretty good player, but he would probably be trade bait if this team doesn't have a playoff record, just because he's going to be probably demanding a decent amount of money in the offseason. He's only 29, so I think he's probably a trade bait piece if this team wants to trade away a player at the deadline. Robert Cron also might be a trade bait piece, but he is signed for 3 years at $750, so he is locked up at a decent term. He's 29 already, but he is a good serviceable 3rd-line player, so we could keep him around until the end of that contract if we want to. Then we also have Paul Ranheim, who's an 81 at 31, and he is signed as well for a couple years at $750. He'd probably be trade bait as well if we do run into problems just because of his age and stuff like that. He's more of a defensive bottom 6 type of option, so I feel like he would probably be a good trade bait option as well if we do want to make trades at the deadline. Him and Derek King for sure. Stu Grimson, another probably trade bait option. He's just an enforcer for the bottom 6 unless we want to keep him around just to goon it up. But yeah, he's a very physical player. Doesn't really bring much offensively at all either. So yeah, that guy could probably be trade bait. So there's probably a few left wingers we could move out if we really want to. Right wing wise, Kevin Dineen, maybe another one of these pieces you could move out, but he is technically like a Kane / Whalers legend. So, but he is signed for 3 years at $750. I believe he's our captain as well. But he is 33 years of age, so we could probably move away from him if we want to. Same with Nelson Emerson. He could end up being trade bait because he is signed for 3 years at 1.2, but he is a serviceable player. Because we do have Jeff O'Neill, who's technically in the system in a sense. He looks like he's going to be a pretty good player, and he will definitely probably be able to take over Emerson's spot or even Kevin Dineen's spot in a few years. Stephen Rice might be a decent option to keep around since he's only 25. Obviously, he didn't have a long career in the NHL in real life, but He only being 25 and 81, he could be a serviceable bottom 6 option for this team, I'd say, maybe third line option. So there is our forward core. Defensively, we got a really rough defensive core. This is where we're kind of struggling at. We do have Glenn Wesley, who's an 84 at 28. He is signed for a couple seasons. We could keep on to him, but at the same rate, we might not be a competitive team with him being as old as he is. So I don't know for sure if we want to keep him around or trade him away. He might have some good value to him. Same with Steve Chason, pretty much the exact same type of player. Couple of years, but more offensively minded than Wesley is, I'd say. Curtis Lazishin, definitely another guy. A lot of these defensemen we could probably move out if we wanted to upgrade our team and stuff like that, or find better players in the draft. Adam Burt's another guy that's 28 and he's signed for a few years. Godiniak is signed for 2 years and he's 27. He might be an okay option to keep for the top 6 pairing. Same with Kevin Haller. I wouldn't mind keeping Kevin Haller around since he's decently young still. And then Merrick Malik is probably our best defensive prospect. 21 and 78, 750 for the next 2 years, and then he's an RFA, so he's probably our best option to replace somebody that is up here, I'd say. So yeah, that's our defensive core, so definitely a lot weaker than our forward core, I'd say. And in our goalies, Sean Burke is signed for 2 years at 2.4, and he is a UFA, so we could trade away Sean Burke because I believe we do have some good goalies in the system. But Sean Burke is a pretty good goalie for the most part right now, but we could trade him away if this team's not contending next season. So we could just give him around for the first year if we want to. And then Jason Mazzotti is not really much of anything, 77 overall, low backup, 26 years of age. We might just keep him around if we want to, or else he's probably going to be thrown into some team's AHL affiliate, my guess. So that is basically our roster except for in the system. We'll quickly take a look at this. As you can see, I nerfed everybody's AHL affiliates, so we do not have any good AHL players whatsoever, except for in goal, because I was able to make more of those. So we do have good goalie prospects. Manny Legacies is 76 at 23, because he was actually drafted by the Whalers, but he never got to play with them, so we do have him in the system. And then our best goalie prospect by a large margin is J.S. Jaguar, who is a 75 high starter at 19. So he's definitely going to be that goalie that we look to replace Burke with, I'd say, in the future. So we do have some decent goalie prospects. And then I believe that's it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that's it pretty much for our roster, which is interesting. Quickly, let me just make sure that nobody went to free agency before we start this up, in a sense. Did anybody go to free agency? No, nobody did. Okay, good. I will also show you guys quickly some other teams' rosters, but I will skim through this a little bit quick, so you might have to pause the video throughout. But here's what teams' rosters looks like if you want to take a look at this and pause the video at any point. But here's the Boston Bruins. So there you go on that front. Couple depth options as well. The Calgary Flames, no, the Buffalo Sabres, never mind. I don't know why I said Calgary. Buffalo ranking like this. Buffalo's looking pretty solid, especially with Hasek between the pipes. The Calgary Flames, led by like Theo Fleury pretty much, and a young Jerome McGinley. There you go. No depth options. The Chicago Blackhawks, led by Alexei Zhamnov and Tony Amonte. And Chris Chelios, I should say, for that matter. There you go, and a scratched option there. The Colorado Avalanche, having a very crazy team. Definitely a team that could win the Stanley Cup in year number 1. If they really want to. Patrick Waugh between the pipes. Brent Severin as depth. The Czech Republic lines, as I said, this is a team comprised of players that played in the Czech Republic at this point in time. So some former NHLers, some future NHLers, that type of thing. But not necessarily the best team, and they shouldn't simulate that well. Unless Roman Cechmanek goes off for some reason. Because Roman Cechmanek was a beast when he did play for the Flyers. The Dallas Stars, obviously winning the Stanley Cup in '99 in real life, so a couple years away maybe from winning a Stanley Cup in this, but they are running a very interesting goalie tandem. So there's that. The Detroit Red Wings, obviously winning the Stanley Cup in the season. Really deep roster when you have an 86 on the third line, but Detroit should come up with a Stanley Cup in year 1. Really good goaltending as well. If they don't win the Stanley Cup in year 1, I will be kind of surprised. Edmonton, not necessarily the best roster, but some solid young players on this roster. There's their defensive core and their goaltending led by Cujo. The Finland Firebirds. This is players playing in the SM Liga. Some future NHLers like Olli Jokinen in there. And some good young defensemen. Brian Rafalski's over there because he did play in the SM Liga at this point in time. Not because he's Finnish. He's not Finnish. He's an American. The Florida Panthers, led by pretty much Ray Shepard and a lot of other good players. Obviously, this Florida Panthers team went to the Cup Finals the year before this, but they lost to Colorado. So there's that. Germany, which is comprised of players playing in the DEL, I'm pretty sure, or the Bundesliga. I can't remember which one it is, but a lot of former NHLers here. A very old team for the most part, except for guys like Marco Sturm and Jochen Hecht. But yeah, it's mostly former NHLers on that Germany team. Then we head over to Los Angeles, led by Ray Ferraro, Dimitri Kristich, that type of thing. And also Rob Blake, you could say, I guess. And there's their goaltending. Then we go to the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, who are here for some reason. I don't know if it's because I put them as MDA as their abbreviation or what, but led by Paul Kariya, Timo Solani, Steve Ruchin, those type of guys. Defensively, led by Mironov, and a solid goaltending tandem with Hebert and Shitalenkov. The Montreal Canadiens, pretty solid roster with them as well. For the most part, a young Saku Koivu. And yeah, the rest of their defense and goaltending is not as good, but still solid roster, I'd say. North American Future Stars replacing the Winnipeg Jets. A lot of guys that were eventually drafted this upcoming season that I wasn't able to include. So you got guys playing in the OHL, the CHL in general, and the United States. So some of these guys, I think most of these guys were actually drafted the year before this, if I'm not mistaken, like in 96 or 95, that type of thing. But you got a lot of potential with this young team to being a pretty good team in a few years if everybody develops well. New Jersey, led by Doug Gilmore, which is a little bit weird to say that. But yeah, very solid New Jersey team with Martin Brodeur obviously in the net. Then we head over to the New York Islanders, who had the Fisherman jersey at this point in time, led by Ziggy Palffy pretty much. But yeah, very bad defensive team, so should be interesting to see how they simulate. New York Rangers, obviously led by Wayne Gretzky, who is probably close to retirement at this stage, 95 at 36, but they also got like Mark Messier, Luc Robitaille. The Rangers are definitely a team that could over-simulate this season just because of Gretzky, so we'll see what happens with them. Then we head on to the Ottawa Senators, which should be an interesting team as well. You got like Alexei Yashin, Daniel Elverson, Alex Dagg. Pretty solid roster as well, but obviously need to develop a little bit, it seems like. So there is Ottawa. Philadelphia, a really good team, obviously went to the Stanley Cup Finals. You got Lindros, Leclerc, Renberg, you know, those type of guys. Legion of Doom pretty much. Ron Hextall. And yeah, a lot of physical players on that team as well, because they do have a decent amount of enforcers. The Phoenix Coyotes, led by Keith Tkachuk, Jeremy Roenick, Mike Gardner, those type of guys, but a very underrated roster, I'd say, for this Yotes team. This is the first year the Yotes existed. Obviously, 95-96 was the last year of the Winnipeg Jets. So there is Phoenix. Pittsburgh, obviously a good roster as well when you have Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. Can't go wrong with this type of roster. They should do pretty decently. They do also got 3 good goalies, so maybe they will trade away somebody like Barrasso or Reggett, or maybe they'll keep around Lalim. Who knows? Russia, replacing the Nashville Predators. These are players that played in the Russian Elite League, I think it was called. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was a Russian league that existed before the KHL. So you got a lot of future NHLers here. You got a lot of future NHLers, and you also got guys like that never made the NHL, like Andrei Tarasenko, who is the father of Vladimir. But still a pretty damn good roster, I'd say, for future players on that team, especially with the young Pavel Datsyuk. San Jose, pretty much led by like Owen Nolan and a bunch of other players. Marty McSorley on defense. Ed Belfour being there is a little bit weird, but should be interesting to see how he does with the San Jose Sharks. St. Louis, led by Pierre Turgeon, Brett Hull, obviously. And then defensively, led by Chris Pronger, who unfortunately Hartford got rid of. Because if we would have had him in this, that would have been nice. But obviously, you got dealt in the Brendan Shanahan trade as well, I think, in that first one. Sweden, All these guys played in the SHL, pretty much. Future NHLers, some former NHLers, some guys that went back over to play in the SHL for a bit. That type of thing. Young Mika Kiprusoff as well. Tampa Bay, not necessarily the best roster, but still Dino Ciccarelli's over there, so that's a pretty solid player. But that defensive core and the goaltending is kind of questionable. Toronto Maple Leafs have a pretty solid roster as well, but not the best center depth, I'd say. Actually, not necessarily the best roster. Led by Sundin and Wendell Clark, pretty much. And then a lot of other average players and below average fourth line, I'd say. But Freddie Modine is decent. And a solid goaltender in Felix Potvin. The Vancouver Canucks, pretty solid roster, I'd say, as well. This team might over-simulate a bit because they do got McGillney, Bure, Naslund, Jelena, so they might be a decent team. That defensive core is also not terrible, and their goaltending's not too bad. It's not the greatest either, though. Kirk McLean. Scott Walker's depth, which is interesting. And then Washington, led by Adam Oates. Obviously, this team went to the Cup Finals the year after this. Peter Bonder is there as well. Really solid roster there in Washington. Gonchar and Housley's there too. And a good goaltender in Kolzigin, and Ranford is the backup. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, that is it for the team rosters. So, final thing to show you guys for this first episode is the draft class. And then I think that'll be pretty much it for this opening episode. We will start the simulation in next episode, and we'll more than likely simulate exactly halfway point of the season, just so you guys can give me some feedback for trades and all that type of thing, because I'd like to go through these seasons as fast as possible, in a sense, just because we know we don't have a lot of time with the series, right? So let's take a look at the draft class. I did add some draft prospects into this year's draft and the next 2 seasons after this. So you got Joe Thornton, obviously the best player in this year's draft, which is good to see that he's supposed to go first overall. You also got Patrick Marleau, Marian Hossa in this draft, Brian Campbell, a couple EA generated guys, which is not a surprise. You also got Roberto Luongo, who's supposed to go in the top 10. And I think that might be it for prospects, if I'm not mistaken. Unless I made more goalies. Oh, David Abisher as well. Yeah, I think there's more goalies at this point. So, yeah, David Abisher is also in this draft. You also got Mika Norinen, and I think that's almost it. Oh, Johan Holmquist as well. Made him. Also, Scott Clemenson. So, you got, like, some good goalie options. Not necessarily the best goalie options after Luongo. But, I mean, you still got a good option with, like, David Abisher potentially and Mika Norinen. And then for defensive prospects, you only really got Brian Campbell and a bunch of EA generated guys, so I don't know how good those guys are. Right wing wise, you just got Marian Hossa, which is a really good player to get. And then left wing wise, you don't have anything other than EA generated. And then center wise, obviously, you got a choice between Thornton and Marleau if we are to make this team not as good as possible. But I think this team might be decent, but it might not be the best either, so we'll end up seeing that in the simulation in next episode, but I think that's pretty much it. Let me actually show you guys our lines quickly, just so we can see the chemistry, so you guys can suggest maybe some line changes for this roster. But right now, this is how the team has been set up. So Sanderson, Castles, and Emerson, Deneen, Primo, and King, and then third line Cron, O'Neill, and Rice, and a fourth line of Ranheim, Manderville, and Grimson. So that's how the AI has it set up. And then the defensive core is Wesley, Chason, Lazizian, and Haller, and then Burton, Godiniak. So you can see our defensive core isn't as good, but I give everybody X factors, and that's why there's a lot of line chemistry throughout the lineup. Goalie wise, obviously we got Burke and Muzzati, and depth wise, Merrick Malik is scratched, so we should probably send him down to the minors, I would say, or we could play him over one of these other guys. That's up to you guys on that front. And then AHL wise, obviously, like I said, the rest of this roster is not really set in stone. But we do got Legacy down there and JS Shigeru, who are going to be playing in the AHL this season. So very excited, and hopefully those guys get some good growth for this season. Because obviously getting JS Shigeru up to an 80-something overall quickly would be pretty nice. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this first episode of our Hartford Whalers Throwback franchise mode. So in next episode, we'll start up the season simulation. We'll do 41 games probably. The next episode after that will be trade deadline and rest of the season simulation. And yeah, we'll see if this team can maybe get to the playoffs in year 1. If it doesn't happen, at least we have a chance of getting like Joe Thornton in the draft. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.